Welcome to our program on benchmarking, a conference created and transmitted via satellite and microwave by the International Training Center at San Diego State University. We are transmitting live from the studios of KPBS at San Diego State University. We are happy to greet our participants distributed among 55 cities in the countries of Mexico, Peru, Ecuador, and other countries in Latin America. I am Armando Osorio, your moderator. This is the fifth in a series of interactive video conferences on the subject of business administration produced by the International Training Center. You will be able to receive this program either in English or with simultaneous translation to Spanish depending on the channel you choose. In the channel in Spanish, you will hear the voices of two different translators. This program was designed to illustrate the practical use of modern media and communications, since we are using a mixture of live and recorded production techniques in order to maximize quality and content. Moreover, it shows the degree of development in telecommunications in education and professional development designed for international audiences. You may ask questions either directly in the studio, by telephone, or by fax during the 3 question and answer periods included in the program of this video conference. We will try to answer most of the participants' questions. We only ask that the questions be brief, concrete, and to the point. It is a pleasure to introduce Mr. Jerome Finnigan. Mr. Finnigan is Human Resources Manager at Xerox Research and Technology in El Segundo, California. As you well know, Xerox is a pioneer company and the one with the most success in the implementation of benchmarking as a formal process. Mr. Finnigan was one of the promoters of quality circles during the 70s. He directed total quality programs at the printing systems divisions at Xerox. He often visits universities in the United States as a guest to give conferences and also serves as a consultant and has given several seminars in many countries. Among Mr. Finnigan's major contributions, we find the books The Race Without a Finish Line, America's Quest for Total Quality, and TQ Manager, a practical guide to managing a total quality organization. Welcome, Mr. Finnigan. Companies in industrialized and developing countries are more and more worried about taking care of their customers' needs. In this manner, a high degree of competitiveness has been generated in order to keep their present customers and to add some more. Undoubtedly, the terms competitiveness, continuous improvement, and the customer is king, to cite a few, are more and more common in some circles. Another term that worries us, which we begin to hear more and more frequently, is the term benchmarking. What does this mean, and how has this strategy been used in today's organizations?
Oh, Armando, the term benchmarking comes from surveying. To a surveyor, it means a point of reference. And to organizations that have entered into what we call benchmarking now, it's an effort or a process to identify a point of reference of who is the best at a particular work process. Organizations who are involved with benchmarking are using this process as a means of establishing operational goals that can help them either match or beat their competition and improve their work processes by continuous improvement.
What else can you comment about the need for companies and public organizations to find out about benchmarking and applying it to improve their competitiveness?
Well, I think it's emerging as an essential strategic tool for all organizations. In the new economy of which we are all a part, this new global economy where competition has become so severe, it is very difficult to try and maintain one's leadership position. The marketplace changes so rapidly, it's essential to have processes that allow us to really understand what is happening in the marketplace, and benchmarking has become a means, cooperatively. It's Lester Thoreau, in a book called Head to Head, refers to it as competitive cooperative economy, and in that sense benchmarking is part of that kind of cooperation and trying to identify who is the best and establishing means to try and match that performance.
During the past month, General Motors and Volkswagen in Germany were involved in a controversy over industrial espionage. According to GM, one of their engineers, an expert in reducing production costs, obtained confidential information which he used at Volkswagen. These accusations were denied by Volkswagen. Could benchmarking be confused in this case of sharing industrial information?
Well, yeah, I certainly cannot comment on the Volkswagen General Motors incident. I don't know anything about it, but I know enough about it to be able to say that that is not a benchmarking circumstance. Benchmarking is a cooperative effort. It's a partnership between organizations to share information. What is shared and what is going to be shared is negotiated between all of those organizations. And to be successful, it has to be done on a very high-valued, very ethical basis, and so what you described as Volkswagen GM wouldn't be a good example.
Very well, ladies and gentlemen, in view of the importance of this subject, which interests all of you, we leave you with Mr. Jerome Finnigan, who will now begin his formal presentation.
Managers tend to examine new business theories and practices with both hope and skepticism. They are eager to find new approaches to the puzzling and persistent problems they work with, but they're also wary of innovations that all too often promise much and deliver only frustration and disappointment. They've learned to ask questions like, is this really a new concept or just a new label for something we already know about? What is the evidence for its usefulness? Is this something that will fit my organization? How can I explain it to my colleagues, and especially my boss? What are the risks, and what are the potential payoffs? It is particularly sensible to ask these questions when exploring the concept of benchmarking. Although most of the elements of benchmarking are familiar, in combination they provide a new way of thinking about competitive analysis and internal goal setting. It is not possible in the time that we have today to cover everything you would need to know to conduct a benchmarking study. That will require you to attend a training class. But what we can do today is help you answer these questions. During our 3 sessions this morning, we will cover 3 topics. We'll begin with defining what benchmarking is and exploring why it is becoming a significant tool. In the second segment, we'll look at benchmarking in relationship to total quality management and how benchmarking supports the pursuit of continuous improvement. Finally, we'll spend a little time on how the process actually works and what is required to be successful. Benchmarking first appeared in the United States about 11 years ago. Initially, Xerox, Motorola, AT&T, and a few others used the process as a means for identifying why their competitors were beating them up in the marketplace. These companies discovered that benchmarking was a powerful process for understanding what is important to an organization's success, that it allowed them to understand their own work processes and why others were able to do these processes better than them. And it taught them how to adapt what they learned to improve their performance. About now, some of you are probably asking 2 questions. First, why did these companies go outside their organization to learn about their own operations? And most important, why did their competitors share information with them? To understand the answers, we must first recognize that there is a revolution taking place around the globe, an economic revolution that is changing the rules by which we work in very basic, very fundamental ways. This revolution has been called the post-industrial economy, the service economy, the knowledge economy, and the information economy. In his best-selling book, Head to Head, Lester Thoreau calls it the competitive cooperative economy. Thoreau wrote, "The next half-century will be a competitive cooperative economic game, A country that wants to win starts by closely studying the competition. The purpose is not emulation, but what the business world calls benchmarking. Find those in the world that are best at each aspect of economic performance. Measure your performance against theirs. Understand why they are better. This new economy Thoreau writes about has new rules. For about 300 years, the primary measure of the world's economy has been productivity. But this is no longer true. Productivity is still a competitive necessity, but speed and flexibility have emerged as new factors. And these new factors require new standards for measurement. In today's world, organizations must provide variety, customization, convenience, and timeliness. Each of these new standards reflects quality, that is, meeting the customer's requirement. Quality in this context is not just an output of work, but a mindset about work process as a means to ensure the speed and flexibility customers now expect. Providing variety, customization, convenience, and timeliness requires that our organizations change the way we structure work and utilize our resources. We have to recognize that in this new global economy, power moves with knowledge, that power transcends traditional limits because knowledge accompanies the people who work directly with our suppliers, our customers, and our competitors. The very nature of how we have traditionally designed work and a worker's tasks is changing. If you follow along with a graphic in your package titled Redefining Productivity, you'll see what I mean. Certainly, organizations will continue to make investments in capital and labor and design work processes to facilitate the production of outputs as quickly as possible in quantities large enough to justify their investment. But now the knowledge possessed by organizations and their workers has taken on strategic importance. Successful organizations are investing in the skills and competence of their people. And because of the increasing importance of time, customization, variety, quality, and a whole new set of other marketplace demands, these organizations are searching for new ways of operating, including the empowering of their employees to work collaboratively and to design their own work processes. Those organizations that are making this transition have learned a new paradigm, that the new productivity is based on creating value, not volume. We can all learn much from these organizations, like AT&T, Citibank, and Saturn division of GM, because they are the pioneers who have ventured into this new territory and demonstrated new levels of improvement. These new productivity measures and Thoreau's competitive cooperative economy also suggest a new paradigm about competition. Prelude and Hamill noted in a Harvard Business Review article 2 years ago that the competitive battles of the 1980s were fought on the basis of incremental cost advantages in existing well-defined markets. But they wrote, quote, "In the 1990s, action will center on the battle to build and dominate fundamentally new markets. The goal will be to create new and largely uncontested competitive space, rather than fight rearguard actions to preserve one's position within competitive space," end quote. This is a battle to create the future, rather than protect the past. What we are faced with is a competitive paradigm based on an unknown future rather than our past experiences. Therefore, we must do things in a new way. But what way? What new notions about the marketplace do we have to consider? I think that as managers, some of the notions that we will have to consider are encouraging innovation by establishing extensible strategies. Strategies based on an organization vision that fully comprehends who we are as an organization and what we want to accomplish. By identifying our core competencies, the skills and knowledge, the special abilities we possess that sets us apart from other organizations, and developing strategies and an environment that allows us to learn from our mistakes and accomplishments. Second, we will have to learn to be open to partnerships, to alliances that help us fulfill our mission. Chrysler's use of Mitsubishi engines and the IBM-Apple partnership on software are just two examples of the kinds of arrangements friends and foes are forming throughout the world. Third, we will have to learn that technology and services are merging, and that markets that once were well-defined are overlapping and blending. Fourth, we must realize that organizations can no longer operate without understanding their customers' requirements and involving the customer in the design of our products and services. Finally, the new paradigm requires that we have knowledge, reliable intelligence, about not only the marketplace, but about ourselves and our competition. The competition is too tough. Technology and knowledge is growing too fast, and everything is moving too quickly for an organization to allow itself to be surprised in the heat of a battle. But this is not a new thought. Over 1,000 years ago, the Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote in his treatise, The Art of War, "Know your enemy and know yourself. In 100 battles you will never be in peril." Throughout history, successful leaders have used this advice to achieve superiority over their opponents. Solving ordinary business problems, conducting management battles, and surviving the marketplace are all forms of war, fought by the same rules. This is the kind of thinking that is the basis for espionage, the CIA, and the competitive analysis groups in our own organization. But intelligence gathering is not always clandestine. Let me give you an example. My first job out of college was as a teacher in high school, where I was also the football coach. That's American football, not soccer. My brother was the soccer player in our family, and the dents in his shins led me to prefer a game where the participants wear pads. But getting back to my story, it is common practice for football coaches to attend clinics where they can learn from their most successful peers. We didn't call it benchmarking, but that is exactly what it was, and still is today. At one such clinic I attended, I heard Joe Paterno, the football coach from Penn State University, share his formula for success. It looks like this. SE stands for self-esteem, how we feel about ourselves, our personal values, as well as our opinion of the organization and its vision and mission, determines the breadth and depth of our self-esteem. Self-esteem is important, but it is not enough. You have to have knowledge. The K stands for knowledge. Not only knowledge about my opponent, but also knowledge about myself. And when we are feeling good about ourselves and know how to correct our weaknesses and build on our strengths, then we can know that we are prepared for our opponent, that we can at least hold our own. It is the sum of our self-esteem and knowledge, then, that determines the level of our confidence. But confidence alone will not be enough. Lots of confident individuals and corporations fail. The final determiner of success is enthusiasm. And how much enthusiasm we bring to the competition will ultimately determine the outcome. Success, then, is determined by our confidence, the sum of our self-esteem and knowledge, multiplied by our enthusiasm. In this formula, benchmarking provides the means for achieving the knowledge requirements, understanding how I match up against the competition so I can improve on my weaknesses and make plans to capitalize on my strengths. Benchmarking has been called creative imitation, most notably by Bob Camp, author of the book Benchmarking, The Search for Industry Best Practices. Bob is considered the father of the formal benchmarking process. Creative imitation is based upon our knowledge of ourselves and our competition, because it is on the basis of that knowledge that we can identify and incorporate the very best practices, regardless of where we find them, inside or outside of our organization, in order to gain superiority to our competition. It is important to know that this process is not new, that it is a proven method for achieving superiority. Let me share with you a couple of examples. In 1880, Francis Lowell traveled to England from his New England home to study the British textile industry. On the basis of his observations, Lowell concluded that he would not be able to improve upon British manufacturing technology, but he also decided that most British mills were laid out poorly and failed to utilize their labor well. When he returned to Massachusetts, he built a plant based on British technology, but with less labor-intensive methods. By 1840, he had established America's largest manufacturing complex, and Lowell, Massachusetts, had become America's second largest city. This was certainly not the world's first benchmarking study, but it probably was the first for America. The Toyota General Motors experience is another worthwhile example. Toyota sent Elijah Toyoda, different spelling, D-A versus T-A, to the United States in 1950 to study automobile manufacturing and engineering processes. Toyoda visited GM, Ford, Chrysler, and Studebaker. On the basis of his observations, he concluded that GM had manufacturing technology that could not be improved upon. But he also discovered that GM maintained large inventories of parts and subassemblies. He concluded that if Toyota could capitalize on GM manufacturing technology while avoiding their material costs, then Toyota could produce a cheaper car. Thus, the just-in-time manufacturing strategy was born. In 1984, GM entered into a manufacturing joint venture with Toyota at Fremont, California, New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated, NUMMI. Robert Stempel, GM's retired chief executive officer, said at the time of the announcement that GM's main reason for this joint venture is to see how Toyota runs a factory. The benchmarking process that Toyota started had come full circle. Today, benchmarking is alive and well in the auto industry and is the source of much continuous process improvement. At this point, I think it would be helpful to consider a definition for benchmarking. There are many definitions in use, but this is one I took from the book, The Benchmarking Book, written by a former employee of mine, Michael Spendolini. I prefer this definition because operationally oriented business units and functions should easily relate to it. Anyone who knows their operation thoroughly will see the value of ensuring that the best of proven practices are incorporated in their operation. I especially like this definition because it contains several key words and phrases like continuous, systematic, evaluating, product, services, and work processes, best practices, improvement. And this definition covers all possible business endeavors, whether a product, a service, or a support process. Let's look at it in detail. First, benchmarking is an evaluating process, so the use of metrics is required in order to measure results. That is what benchmarking means. Quote, a point of reference from which measurements can be made, end quote. Outside of land surveying, where a benchmark is well understood and accepted, there's only one other common use of the term. The computer industry has used the term benchmarking to describe a standard process for measuring the performance capabilities of software and hardware systems available from vendors. The focus of evaluating is on the practices, because it is only by changing the current practices or business processes that overall effectiveness can be achieved. So benchmarking stresses practices and the understanding of these practices before determining the metric. Benchmarking metrics are the result of understanding best practices, not the other way around. Second, benchmarking is continuous measurement because, unfortunately, the competition will not stand still and wait for us to catch up. Few of you would object to constantly seeking best practices because professionals know that there has to be a constant sharing of ideas and debate before an industry can improve itself. True professionals also know that the world is a rapidly changing place, and he who hesitates will be lost. In his address last May to the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School's graduating class, Louis Platt, Hewlett-Packard's chief executive officer, told the new Masters of Business Administration that it is no longer survival of the fittest, because in today's world, it is survival of the quickest. Third, benchmarking focuses on practices, the best practices. That is why benchmarking is more than competitive analysis. because the objective is to learn not merely what is produced, but how it is produced. The focus is not on the product or service alone, not even the significance of the metrics, but the process. How was it done? This is what the Japanese call danatatsu, the best of the best practices, the best of class, the best of breed, regardless of where they exist, in one's own company, one's own industry, or outside one's industry. And that is why it is important to remember that since the objective is to identify the best practices, then the best benchmarking partners are not necessarily your direct competitor, but the industry leaders, regardless of the industry. As an example, since the day Xerox initiated benchmarking, our benchmark company for warehousing and distribution has been LL Bean, a recreational clothing distributor. LL Bean is not exactly a mainstay of the business equipment industry, but they are more efficient at inventory control and product delivery than anyone else in the world. Sound benchmark data provides an organization a better understanding of not only what another organization does and how they do it, but more importantly, how well they do it. With the kind of intelligence benchmarking provides, organizations are able to compare their products and process with the best, establish operational goals and strategic plans on the basis of these best practices, obtain insights to new ideas, and as a result, predict their own future performance with more accuracy and market reality. Benchmarking is a significant tool that can benefit all our organizations. It is significant because the information that is gathered can be used in a variety of areas. It allows us to establish short and long-term plans that are consistent with the marketplace, to predict trends in our business, to discover opportunities for innovation, and to think creatively, to think, as some call it, out of the box. And it allows us to compare our products, services, and processes with the best of the best, and to establish goals based on these practices. A description of what benchmarking is would not be complete without some comment on what benchmarking is not. Benchmarking requires a long-term commitment to data sharing and improvement. It is not a single event. Neither is it a simple process that provides simple answers. Benchmarking begins with the knowledge of a methodology that on the surface appears simple because it is easy to comprehend. But in practice, it will require discipline and patience, and the willingness to use the data required to improve the organization. It is not quick and easy. Neither is benchmarking copying or imitating, nor is it a fad. No, benchmarking is none of these things, but it is here to stay.
Thank you, Mr. Finnigan, for a very interesting comment to our audience. We will now begin our first session of question and answer. We will receive them by phone, fax, whichever you prefer. We have one by fax. How can I be sure when I share information with another organization in the same field that the information will not be misused?
Armando, when an organization begins benchmarking, the beginning of the process is to go out and identify organizations they wish to partner with, people that they would share information with. The type of information that is shared, how that data is going to potentially be used, are all part of that upfront discussion. So although organizations will internalize to their own operations what they learn, in benchmarking, you certainly know what information you're going to be sharing. You generally know how the other organization intends to use that data. And when, in fact, that doesn't happen or turn out that way, then you'll probably not make an arrangement with that organization again.
Bien, estamos esperando las llamadas que nos hagan nuestra teleaudiencia en distintos países de América.
We're waiting for the next questions from the many countries that are listening to us. We wish for the questions to be concrete and to the point so that we can answer the most numbers of questions. We have another one by fax.
¿Se debe hacer algún cambio en la estructura?
Must a change be made in the structure of the organization before beginning to work with the new focus?
Good question. Generally, no, but it